All right. I'll do this because it's easy. I'll call the Wilmington Board of Education Policy Committee to order. It is March 3rd, 2022. It is 5:30 p.m. We have a pretty short agenda. There's one policy for discussion, and I just wanted to have a discussion about what would work for you, the best way to attack the other policies. So the first policy, did Brenda send out a copy to you of the that unexpected education funds account, or no? Did that go out to you?
Yes, I got a
Okay.
copy.
I
Perfect.
probably
Okay. I'm gonna
did,
put
but
it.
I haven't had a chance to look at it.
That's
I
okay.
got
I'll put it on screen.
Okay.
So let me just give me 1 second. Share. So this is, can you see this on my screen?
Can you make it any bigger, Phil? Or no? Is that hard to do?
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
feel like
this is the non-lapsing fund account. It's called unexpended education funds account. The non-lapsing account is what Donna calls it in the finance software. Long story short, the way this account works is if you have money left over in the end of your budget year, you can request the Board of Finance put money into your non-lapsing account. And there's some parameters around how much money you can put in there. And this is the policy that basically operates that. And quite honestly, we're reviewing this policy because I came across an issue with it. There's some minor things to change, like this 2% is what the state now allows, that funds up to 2% of the amount appropriated you could do. The issue I found with it, though, is what's on the bottom here. And I'm not sure the history why they did this, if they wanted additional oversight or what the thought process was. But the strikeout, let me just kind of walk through what they had. Basically, what would happen is if the Board of Ed, the Board of Ed requests the money at the end of the year to go into the non-lapsing account, the Board of Finance approves it, the money goes into the non-lapsing account. So let's say, for example, we wanted $50,000 this year to go towards an outplacement tuition. The Board of Ed would have to approve the $50,000 request. It would go to the Board of Finance for this policy. And because the way the policy is written, that anything over $20,000 would require it to go to a town meeting. Here's where I have an issue with it. And particularly, this is one of those funds that is really meant for, unexpected costs, is that especially when it comes to special education, you can't share details. You can't share any details about an outplacement. And even saying outplacement can be a slippery slope. You want to be able to just simply say, we have unexpected, costs in special education. I know this sounds strange, but it almost seems like we're not being transparent to the public, even though we would say we can't tell you what it is, but we just literally can't. And so my concern is I would have to go to the Board of Finance and say, look, at the Board of Ed approved a request for $50,000. It's for special education costs. And you really can't share more than that. Now, if they get beyond that, and they've been through this, I think they would approve it. But now you have to have a town meeting. So you're going to go to town meeting and you're going to say, look, we want $50,000 for special education costs, but you can't share details about it because it's confidential. If they vote it down, you still owe the $50,000 cost because it's for the special education. So I had a conversation with Mike McCoo as the chair of the Board of Finance about this. I kind of shared the same situation. I said, here's where I think this is interesting, is this piece of the policy that's now marked off, there's a strike through it, is not required under law, under statute. It was an additional piece they put in. And my feeling is these funds were already approved. When the budget was approved, it was approved for education purposes, right? So the budget goes to vote in May. It's approved. It's a $9 million budget. There's $100,000 left over. The Board of Finance decides they want to allow $50,000 to go into the non-lapsing fund because the board requested it. That money has already been approved by taxpayers under education. To go back to a town meeting, to go back to the Board of Finance to use those funds, I'm not sure I understand that process. The Board of Ed and myself we're required to manage our budget, right? We're required to manage a $9 million budget. To have to go back to the Board of Finance to request funds, and anything over $20,000 go to a town meeting doesn't make sense to me. I think there's got to be transparency, which is the expectation from the Board of Education, that to say, look, we have an outplacement or special education costs. We're going to back it up with receipts because we're audited. That I don't think we need that additional step. And I just worry about having to go and not seem transparent in that special education kind of, example that I'm giving. So I took what was there and just modified it to this red, and just basically said each such expenditure shall be authorized by the local Board of Education. You would vote on it. I can't spend money as a superintendent on a non-lapsing fund. You would have to vote on those funds. Obviously, to vote on those funds, I'm going to have a cost. I'm going to have to follow purchasing procedures unless it's special education and it's a specific outplacement. Expenditures from the account are to be used for educational purposes, which may include, it doesn't have to be, non-recurring or unanticipated expenditures such as emergency capital or maintenance needs or unanticipated outside student placement and associated costs. You may determine that projects such as, where the town is currently moving away from being on the same email network as us. And the reason for that is we're trying to get cybersecurity insurance. We're going to have to do that at some point. It's going to cost money as a project. That would make sense to use non-lapsing funds. It's not special education related, but it sure falls under education purposes. And then you don't have to tax people on it because you have already taxed people on it. So if you have money in the fund to pay for it, you could determine if you wanted to do that. So that's kind of my recommendation, is to shift away from going through the Board of Finance, which they're the ones that still would be saying at the end of the budget year, at the end of this budget year, you had $50,000 left and you said, hey, can we put $10,000 in that would max out whatever our account would be. And Donna always tells us that amount. If they say yes, then it goes into a Board of Education account, the non-lapsing account. And the way you would draw it down would be you'd have to have a vote in a Board of Education meeting to use non-lapsing funds to pay for an expenditure. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Did Mike agree? Did Mike McHugh agree to this?
Yeah, Mike, and I think this would take, if this is going to be a policy you're going to change, I would want to take this to the Board of Finance with the explanation. I gave Mike the same examples. The one, the taxpayer has already approved the funds for educational purposes. And two, that, the special education example, that you really can't go and sit in front of a town meeting and say give any details about the costs.
Yeah. And they're going to ask questions and it's going to get really awkward.
And all I can say is,
yeah,
it's for special education purposes. I can't give you any further details. That is really hard for public members that don't understand the confidentiality piece and legally required to understand.
And you say that it is this is not a choice, it is a legal requirement.
I could say that. And the thing is we're going to say that at the Board of Ed meeting, and to then say it again at the Board of Finance, and then to say it again in a town meeting. town meetings cost money. I'm just not sure
Yeah.
why we're spending more money again to
Mhm.
utilize money that's already been approved for education and sitting in an account. So that's why I'm making this recommendation. And I'll show you the law. This is the law right here. Can you see that okay?
Mhm.
No, I can't read it.
Can you
let me-
read it out loud, Phil?
Yeah, let
Please.
me read it. It's
Yeah.
section 10-248A is the statute, unexpended education funds account. And it says for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020, and each fiscal year thereafter, notwithstanding any provision of the general statutes or any special act, municipal charter, home rule ordinance, or other ordinance, the Board of Finance in each town having a Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen in each town having no Board of Finance, or the authority making appropriation for the school district for each town may deposit into a non-lapsing account any unexpected funds from the prior fiscal year from the budgeted appropriation for education for the town, provided. So that's basically just saying they can put money into a non-lapsing fund. As
So
long
they
as-
don't,
Finance, Phil, has control over this account then, don't they? In other words,
Current,
we can draw from it, we can put money in, but they control it to some extent.
they absolutely control it right now, and that's what I'm suggesting you change. And here's why. They give 3 reasons in that, that for this money. And it says, provided such deposited amount does not exceed 2% of the total budgeted appropriation for education for such prior fiscal year. So if I go back to the policy, that's why this is that 2% now. Okay, straight from statute. The second thing says each expenditure from such account shall be made only for educational purposes, meaning it can't be used for anything other than education,
Right.
right? And it's already been approved. Here's the last thing. Each such expenditure shall be authorized by the local Board of Education for such town. So that's the statute. They went, when this policy was written originally, what year was it? Looks like 2015. They went above and beyond and added all this additional procedure in to go to the Board of Finance to have a town meeting. It can only be over $20,000 in a single year. I'm not sure per the statute, you do not need all those items. The statute gives the Board of Education permission to use these funds for educational purposes as you see fit once it is in the non-lapsing account.
Well, we're going to be very transparent on this anyway. If this is adopted, when we withdraw money from that account, the Board of Finance is going to know whether it's from maintenance or special education or whatever. So
Absolutely.
you have control over it. It's being transparent. They know where the money is going.
Yes, I agree 100%, Herb, and that's why I'm making this recommendation is that, look at the Board of, I can't spend this money. It's not within your budget. I control, the budget from the standpoint of once the money is approved, I'm making those approvals. The non-lapsing fund needs to go through the Board of Education for a vote to be spent.
so there's,
Money that goes into this account, like we can give we can fund up to 2% as currently, or is it 3%?
So it's the Board of Finance can make a recommendation that funds up to 2% of the amount appropriated to the BOE for that fiscal year. And then the maximum amount you can hold in that account cannot exceed 3% of the most current fiscal year budget. So you can,
What happens to the interest on the investment on that money?
I don't think you're earning interest.
So back into the account until it reaches 3%, and then anything over 3% goes into the general fund.
Yeah, honestly, Herb, I don't think they earn interest on this because it's a separate account. I think it just sits there.
They're going to sit on 200,000,
You're correct.
280,000. I don't know.
Yeah, I could ask Donna that question. I don't think it earns interest, but I can definitely find that out. I mean, it's whatever is in the non-lapsing fund. You know, I just go to her and say, hey, Donna, you know, can you tell me how much money is in the account? And she gives me the dollar amount. This just removes the Board of Finance level, the town meeting level, and allows the Board of Education to control education funds that were already approved for education from the town.
So we still need to get the Board of Finance approval to put the money into the fund, but we don't need a vote to get the money out, or we still do?
No, that you said
No.
it correct the first time. So
Okay,
they can determine, they can say, hey, we had a really hard year. You guys had some savings. You had $150,000 in savings. We had a tough year. Somebody else had a shortfall. We're not going to allow you to put any money into the non-lapsing fund this year. Right? They can say that. And you're maxed out. As of today, you're maxed out already. So you, at the end of this year, you couldn't put any money in unless you spend some money. Okay?
Mhm.
Where does it say that, Phil?
Say that again?
Where does it say that? That
Say what?
I mean, if
the
we want
3%.
we should be able to put the money in, but you're saying the Board of Finance can say, no, you can only put in 15,000 this year.
So the statute is, and I think they are the ones that added the 3%. Again, I don't think the 3% is a big issue because 3% of our budget is still a lot of money, $250,000, something like that.
Yeah.
The only item that's in the statute is this 2% that they can do each year. Such deposit amount does not exceed 2% of the total budget appropriation for education for that prior fiscal year. They added in when they wrote this again, this was their language, this 3%. The maximum amount of that account cannot exceed 3% of the most current fiscal year education budget. I'm not recommending you change to 3%. If you wanted to do that, that's up to you. It seems to me that if you have your argument could be, hey, we had a really good year. Some students that were outplaced moved in. We have found, an additional couple of grants. We have a lot of money left over. We'd like to put it in. Well, with this, it cannot exceed 3% of the most current fiscal year budget. That's why you're maxed out right now.
The old language, Phil, who put that in? Was that based on the statute, the old statute, or no?
No, I think I'm going to make an assumption, Ann. I don't know.
Okay.
My assumption is because, it was a new policy. This was something
Mhm.
new that came out. They didn't have a non-lapsing fund. They didn't know how it was going to operate. They wanted to be sure there was steps in place to monitor the funds. That's my assumption, right?
So it's probably Board of Finance that wanted to have some extra guardrails in it.
I would assume so.
Okay.
I think when you start open it, rightfully so, right? They're the ones, but they're the
Mhm.
ones that can control what goes in it anyways.
Mhm.
So the guardrail to me is still there
Yeah.
in several manners. One, they can approve or say no if you ask to put more money in. The second guardrail is that if you're going to spend money out of this account, you still need to justify it. You still need to show that it's for educational purposes. You still need to show receipts. It still is going to be audited. So it's not like you can just go, hey, the Board of Education is going to take a retreat to Hawaii. It doesn't
Mhm.
work that way.
Well, the other thing is it's to their advantage because there's $250,000 that we have access to pay unexpected expenses without having to go to them to add for money that we have not budgeted. If we do have an unusual expense.
That's correct. I
Yeah.
agree with that.
So,
Now, we cannot use the money for anything except what's mentioned here, emergency capital, maintenance needs, and anticipated outside expenses. We can't use it for books or supplies.
You can.
according to this.
Yes, so the red right here, the adjustment, and this is why, yeah, their old, the way it was written, where they said, the account is to be used for non-recurring or unanticipated expenditures, including but not limited to emergency capital or maintenance needs or
Okay.
unanticipated outside student placements and associated costs. But again, if you go back to the statute, it says, sorry, I'm moving screens around here. It says each expenditure from such account shall be made for only educational purposes. This is anything education. So what I did is I put the word may in there. Expenditures from the account are to be used for educational purposes, which may include non-recurring or unanticipated expenditures such as emergency capital or maintenance needs, or unanticipated outside student placements and associated costs. But it also could be, you know what, we want to buy $10,000 worth of books. That's an educational, it's being used for an educational purpose.
Phil, they still have control over the account though, don't they? The last paragraph, for example, on closing the account, if they want that money that's in there for town purposes, they could close the account and it goes into the general fund.
Correct. They are the Board of Finance is the financial committee that, governs those things. So if they decided that they wanted to close this account, they're the only power that could do that. The Board of Ed could not close this account.
Did they put that section in themselves or did the board put it in?
I don't know. It's not part of the statute, but I am again making an assumption that that piece you have to have. Actually, let me just see. This might be part of a different statute. It's just because it's naming Board of Finance in this piece of the statute that they have procedures for opening and closing accounts. I have to assume that's part of it, that they're the only ones that could do it. But again, they can't do it without public notice, and the money would go back to the general fund.
Yeah.
I think that they understand the purpose. I don't think the board has abused this account, and the Board of Finance has a approved money going into it. So they understand the purpose of this account. They understand that if you write the language the way this is written, that you can take $50,000 out of your budget to offset your budget, which is what's in your budget for next year for special ed to bring the cost down. If you wanted to, buy new laptops, you could do that. Otherwise, you have to go through Board of Finance, anything over 20,000, and you got to go to a town meeting. I just don't know that that is necessary when the Board of Education could make those decisions.
And it was our money originally, and not the board's money originally.
That is correct. And that's another reason, Herb, I think that's important, as I shared with Mike, was, already, it wasn't that, if we were going to return money on a $9 million budget and we had $200,000 left over, it wasn't that the town approved $8,800,000. They approved $9 million for education.
Right.
So, that money has already been approved for education. And that's another reason I think that it would be okay to adjust this language to this, to this process.
The other reason I think this is important is because with the budgeting that you're using now, the budgeting truly represents what's being spent. There's no extra, there's really no extra money in it. You look at the library budget, you look at, there really isn't any extra money in there. So there is no cushion,
Right.
so to speak. So this is really important for that reason, that we have this backup.
There's a lot of scenarios that you could run in a smaller, and $9 million is a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but it is a smaller budget compared to some of the bigger towns, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, when you have one placeholder in insurance, well, one person takes insurance, that placeholder is gone, and you're still required, someone else comes in to fund it. There are districts that have, you know, a placeholder for outplacement. Well, this is your placeholder for outplacement, but you don't want to go to town meeting to do that. If, you know what, as of today, we have 32 kindergarten students. You're going to hear this from me next week. We have 32 kindergarten students registered for next year already. That's a lot of kids at this time of year already. If we had to hire another teacher, you don't have money in the budget to do that, but you could surely come to this fund if you wanted to. So I think it's all in how you use it. And again, Herb's point was perfect. It's that you're transparent about it, and that it would be a discussion, you know, use of non-lapsing funds for whatever it was. And there would be a board discussion. And if it failed, it wouldn't go anywhere. If it passed, we would spend the money.
I think it's a good policy. Yeah. And then you will run it by the Board of Finance to be sure they agree with the changes. Is that the plan?
Well, it's a board, and this is what's kind of interesting, is this is a Board of Education policy that had significant restrictions written into it. And I don't know if that was like, hey, we're only going to open this account for you if that's the way it is. But obviously it's a different Board of Finance today. I think what would happen is if this were going to pass committee, my suggestion would be to take this in the modified way, talk to the board, talk to the full board about it, and just say, hey, if you support this change before you approve it, I think it's worth a presentation from the Board of Finance so they understand the changes and why, and then to have the board approve it. That's not typical. You don't have to do that. But again, transparency and why. Those are the two reasons, right? It's the reason why you want to do that.
We're partners, so they need to be aware.
You've already talked with them, haven't you, about this? So
I talked to the chair, but I think it was, you know, just a conversation to say, hey, I want to let you know, because I don't like surprises. And, you know, I knew this meeting was going to be posted. Anybody can join. I didn't want the chair of the Board of Finance to hear about this through after the fact. And so I just gave him a heads up to say, we're going to be talking about it. I don't know where it's going to go, if it's going to be approved, but I want to let you know this is why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking. I do think it's worth a presentation or a conversation to the Board of Finance just to say, look, we're changing our policy. You were making a suggestion to change our policy or recommendation. Here's why.
it's still the board policy, though.
You are correct.
The board decides on their policies, but with some input. But I agree with Dan. I think this is so seems to be okay the way it has been presented.
I really like taking away the town meeting, because chances are anything that ends up in this, you know, that money we're using from this fund could be very confidential and could be very awkward to bring it out. And people are going to keep asking questions. And, you know, even if we say legally, we cannot disclose how this money's being spent.
It doesn't look.
And that's awkward. It's really awkward. And it's, you know, yeah.
The books are still edited, Anne.
They are.
What her? No.
He said the books are still audited, and they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Brianna, you have any questions?
I'm glad we're talking about this, because this non-lapsing fund keeps coming up, and every time someone says it, I listen really hard and try to figure out what in the world is going on. So it's been kind of like putting a puzzle together. So this is very helpful for that. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Is that typical for like in other towns and so on? Is that
To have a
typical?
non-lapsing fund?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Do other boards have that here in Wellington?
No,
it's an education fund.
Education specific.
The Board of Finance has a fund, and they have almost $1 million in it, I guess, which they tap into every time they determine the taxes for the
Mm.
town. Part of the money from that fund is applied to the taxes. Otherwise, the mill rate would go up and the tax rate would go up in town.
Right.
And they're
Okay.
only allowed to keep a certain amount of money in that one too, isn't that? Something about 14% or,
Well, there's a recommendation. I don't think they have a
Okay.
limit based on what they
Okay.
can get.
so that it's advantageous to kind of use some of that money was
Right.
my understanding listening to
Correct.
their meetings.
Yeah, I think the recommendation has always been 10 or 12% is what you want to have. That's what the auditors have suggested. But that fund works. It's ironic that that fund works very similar to this one. If
It
they need
does.
some money, they have access to it.
Yeah.
You know, so I've always been stuck on why would you go to another town meeting after you've already had a town meeting about the same amount of money? So that would be my suggestion.
Mhm.
I know it said that the Board of Finance can close it at any time. Can they dip into it?
No. Statutorily, they cannot, and that's what this line says. Each expenditure shall be authorized by the local Board of Education for such town. The Board of Ed is the only group. If they close it, the money goes into the general fund.
And why would that happen? Like, can you give me an example of why a Board of Finance might choose to do that? I mean, if a Board of Education was spending money willy-nilly and doing all kinds of crazy things, I can see that they'd want to take the reins again, but why else
Sure.
would?
Sure, misuse or sometimes there's other funds that they might have in their spending plan, you know, that just town procedurally, that maybe they have one master fund for everyone. That helps, they could see that as helping them. And the reason why is because, you know, maybe it's not education. When this money goes just into education, it can only be spent for education. Whereas they have a significant flood down at River Road, the turf is torn up or something happens and they could go into a general fund and pull some of that money. And if this money was in there, it would be eligible for that. But the way this is worded, it is an education fund account, not recreation, not, you know,
It
road.
seems like one extreme or the other. They're not going to touch it at all. Can't touch it at all, or can completely close it.
Mm.
I feel like there should be some middle ground there a little bit, but
I think that's
It's fine.
conversation though. That's conversation, you know, I think if the board said, look at it, we're maxed out. We know that the town is having a significant shortfall. If the Board of Education voted and said, we would like to remove $70,000 from our lapsing fund, you might have the ability to do that. I don't know that for certain. I would want to ask an attorney, but if the
Mm.
board voted on it because it's an expenditure that you're approving,
that's true.
you would have the ability to do that.
Okay.
If we max out this account, but we have additional money at the end of the year surplus, then we normally would give that back to the town. But that would be a
Correct.
separate amount, really.
Correct. Like last year, I think we put in like 50,000 or something, and then
Yeah.
150,000 was given back. Some people use, this is where the example of the cap here, and you were talking about this before, not to exceed 3% of the most current fiscal year budget. There are some towns that use this to build a little treasure trove to fund things like, hey, we have a significant capital project coming up, and we want to make sure we have money in for it. And you would take it out of the capital plan and fund it yourselves, things like that. I think, Herb, doesn't E.O. Smith have a fund like this too, that because they don't have to return money?
They have a number of funds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They do.
And they can pull, they could choose to pull money for, hey, we realized the capital project for the roofs at, EO was expensive. We're going to fund the solar, I'm just giving you an example. I don't think they really did that, but that's why the cap, why some people don't put the cap on. So they have the ability to, you know, get to a point, but I don't think the cap is bad. I really don't. I think the cap that's on there right now is a reasonable amount of money. Worst case scenario, somebody comes into town, moves into town that is outplaced and it's, you know, residential, you're easily over $200,000. You at least have something to put towards that.
So
Did
this
you-
stat, go ahead, Brianna.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, did this statute raise it from 1% to 2%?
Yeah, you can see in the update, and we've been using the 2% number because the statute trumps it.
Okay.
But you can see down here in this history, this is where they changed it.
Okay, very good. Brianna?
Did you say that EO does not have to give back whatever they have left over?
They do not. They
So
have it
is that by district or why is that?
because they're a regional school district. They don't have a board of finance. They approve their budget and that's their budget. And then they tell the towns what they owe. You vote on it. I mean, the vote is at the referendum.
Right.
But they don't return money back to towns afterward.
Oh,
We
Herb,
have-
what did they do with the money?
We have workshops and meetings, and we go through the budget with the public present. And it's closely monitored by some people in town. As Phil points out, we don't have to go to the any board of finance or anything like that, but we have to go to the town referendum. And at that time, the towns, Asheville, the Mansfield can either accept it or turn it down.
And that's to determine what you are using the funds for?
That's just for the
Is that right?
budget.
To approve the
Just for the
funds?
budget itself.
For the budget.
Okay.
At the end of the year, and this is they're in the same boat, Brianna. So if they have money at the end of the year, it doesn't go back to anybody. It goes into their accounts. And they you know have specific
Yeah,
funds. I don't know all the funds.
We don't return money back to the towns.
So do you keep that and roll it over, or do you take things out of your budget because you're going to use those funds for it?
It goes
Like
back
you-
to our budget for the next year.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like us. We could apply, you know, 10% of a grant, 50% of a grant, 100% of a grant. It depends on your budget year and how much you want to put into it. So we make those decisions too.
Gotcha.
Any other questions about this policy?
Learning that town meetings and all of these things cost money was news to me within the last few months. So anytime we don't have to go do that and cost people more money so we can say what we do with money seems smart to me.
Would you recommend that I take this draft policy then, and before sharing it with the entire Board of Education, I guess I could send it to the entire Board of Education, but just get on a Board of Finance agenda so that they know before otherwise it's months. I mean, I can just get on one of their agendas, share that this is going to be your recommendation. If there's any feedback, I come back to this policy group. And then move forward from, if there's no feedback and they say, nope, we agree with you, then we just bring the policy for approval to the full Board of Ed.
I would introduce it to the Board of Ed so that the Board of Ed doesn't find out about it at a policy meeting, at a finance meeting.
No, I would email this draft to them
Okay,
and basically just say, FYI, this is going to be on a future Board of Education agenda. It's also going to be presented to Board of Finance because it's a significant change that, and again, you tell me how you want to do it. If you just want to go straight to Board of Ed, because it's your policy and you share afterwards, I could just send a letter to Mike McCoo saying, here's what the Board of Ed Policy Committee is recommending. It's going to be on the Board of Ed agenda at this meeting. If your Board of Finance members would like to join, you could also do it that way.
Yeah, because eventually it'll be our decision anyway.
right.
The Board of Finance is involved in this somewhat, I think it's fair that you should go to Mike and the rest of the Board of Finance Committee there and just let them know this is what we're planning to do, and have a recommendation, hopefully of the policy committee.
Yeah. I feel though, like you're explaining it to us, Phil, was really important in understanding it. If we just send the rest of the board a copy of the new policy, and even with the old policy, I think your explanation is really valuable. So I think even if we just took 5 minutes at our meeting and you just quickly went over it and then said, but I'm now going to the Board of Finance and we'll have a vote after, or I don't know.
So maybe what we can do then is I mean, there's a committee report on Tuesday night, is that we can just do the committee report and say, committee has an updated policy. I can even show it if you want. I mean, as this draft policy, and before it's presented to the Board of Ed or Board of Finance, we just wanted to share with you what our recommendation is going to be, but want to share it with the Board of Finance as well before going to a vote. Does that make sense to you?
That's
So
great.
we'll vote on it next month then.
I think, yeah, you would vote on it in April. Does that make sense to you?
And we really won't need it until the end of the year anyway.
Yeah.
That's when we would use it again.
Yeah, we have time.
Well, unless you wanted money.
Oh, so until April, we would have to go to the town meeting to get money.
You're correct.
Okay, yeah.
How do you get on a Board of Finance agenda? Like, how long does that take?
It doesn't take
Typically.
long. I just email Mike and say, hey, can I sneak in for 10 minutes just to do a quick presentation about a change that, is a Board of Education policy. It's going to be a recommendation of the committee. And he usually can sneak me in. It's even in budget season, even in budget season, because honestly, this impacts budget season because in your current 22-23 budget, you have a $50,000 offset using non-lapsing funds.
I'm just thinking if there won't be a Board of Finance meeting before Tuesday. So
No, that's okay.
Right,
So
well,
let me
yeah,
see.
so I think you can go, it would be fine, I would think, to go forth and ask to be placed on an agenda. We'll talk about it on Tuesday, and then you can
Right.
say, I've already taken steps towards meeting with the Board of Finance about this, and then we'll come back. If
Correct.
something, what would happen at our Board of Education meeting where someone would significantly object, you could probably always pull yourself off an agenda if necessary, right?
Right, and it's not really, it's a committee report, so it's not really up for discussion at that point in time. You're not going to vote on it. You're not
That's
going to.
right.
You're just simply going to say, look, we're going to be making a recommendation. The committee thought it was important to go and share this with the Board of Finance as well. Phil's in the work of doing that, and we can move forward from there. And that this will be on your agenda in April.
And we
Okay.
wanted them to be aware before it went to the Board of Finance, what was being presented.
That
Okay.
sounds good.
So let me stop sharing this.
Do you need a motion or
Nope,
No,
you
not
can't.
in the committee?
No,
Okay,
no votes in your committee.
okay. Mhm.
Okay, so this is your agenda for tonight, and so Brianna, just it was a good run for you because you haven't been through this. Basically, anything obviously that's in red is new. Any crossouts, or you can see the strike through. It's important when we go through policies, so people can see the changes, because when they go to the full board, that's how they're presented. It'll show the strikeouts. That way they can see all the changes, okay?
Yeah.
So the second part of this agenda is really planning for these things. And there's kind of two parts. The first item is the first part is how you want to tackle these. Because some of them are long, and I'll be honest with you, when it comes to bullying, reporting child abuse, sexual discrimination, restraint, you can get in the weeds, but I'm going to tell you, 99% of those policies is legal. So what
Mhm.
I'm going to recommend to you, and so is really policy for private use of vehicles. What I'm going to recommend to you is that typically I would give you some edits just like I did tonight. What I would recommend is that the edits that I currently have for that group of policies that are mainly legal, we've already done some work on them, but I'd like to send those to our attorney so she can review them. And then I can then bring them back to you and say, okay, the attorney has reviewed these. She's okay with these. Now let's have a conversation. But for the most part, the things that she said, you can't change this, that you just leave alone.
Mhm. Yeah, I would want
Ironically,
to
if
know
you-
what's untouchable.
Right. Ironically, if you look at a lot of policies, the bullying policy, I don't care if you go to Ellington, Ashford, Willington, Enfield, Bolton, you're going to see a lot of the same language because it's legal. Okay. So that's one part. So if you're okay with that, how many do you want at a time?
Mm.
I want to give the attorney some time to review it, but if you're okay with, hey, I'm going to give you 5 policies. Some of these are 10 pages long. I'm also aware that you're also reading curriculum. I want to value, I don't want to burden you with all of that. If you feel comfortable with the strike throughs and what's there from the attorney, we can just discuss it, and maybe whatever we get through, and whatever we don't, we just come back to it another meeting. Is that how you want to handle it?
Yes.
On the policy 9326, what exactly is that? I don't remember.
So that policy is the one that the board's been talking about for what we put in minutes. That is not going to be the legal conversation. That's going to be you all determining what you want to put into minutes, what how much detail. And the vote, the policy is called minutes and vote recording, but you also should be adding something to that policy about video recordings. Zoom, you don't currently have a policy around that. And I've been waiting to see what happens in April, because that could all go away. But if you want to continue to record your meetings and post something, you could say, and I think EO Smith has this, Herb. They only keep their videos on YouTube for I think it's 45 days, and then they take them off. We
Wow.
keep all of our videos. So you would want to state that in your policy. So that's something that, the detail of you put in your minutes. I think that if I were going to separate these out, I would separate these out into 3 meetings. One is dress code. The reason dress code, for separating that into a separate meeting, is because the middle school students and principal did a lot of work on that policy together, and I would want them to present it to you. And I think that would be important. And then they are fully aware that they're just making a recommendation to you, and that you're making a recommendation to the full board. But I think that would be one meeting. The second meeting would be bullying, child abuse, discrimination, restraint, and use of private vehicles. And if you could hammer through those and just realize that they're mostly legal, that could be done in one meeting, depending on how comfortable you are with that. If you're not, and you're going to, go wordsmith it word for word, it's going to take a while. And then the last meeting or third policy to kind of tackle would be minutes and vote recording. I think that's the conversation in itself.
So would we see copies of these so we can look them over, or?
Oh yeah, all of these are online too. So the most current policy is on our website. But what I can do is I would pull all of these, and before we'd meet, Herb, I'd email you a PDF, just like we had sent out, with the edits in it, so you could see what I'm recommending. And then that would allow you to, obviously read ahead, so you know what we're going to be talking about that day. If you have a problem with a line or a statement, we can determine if it's legal or if it's, something we want to change.
Would the middle school students be presenting to the full board?
They could, if you so choose to. if you like their language, if you like the way they wrote, and they wrote a decent policy, I'm not gonna lie. It's a
Oh,
decent
cool.
policy. They did a good
Yeah.
job. And they looked at other policies. They had some really good and honest discussions about things that they're looking to. They understand that the policy has to meet elementary and middle, not just middle school, and that beyond the policy, I have the ability, and so does the principal have the ability to refine it as we put in, beyond policy, we put in regulations. And so I have the ability to fine tune that if I wanted to,
Okay.
but they've done a really good job. So
Mhm.
that would be up to you. I think if we bring 1 or 2 students in with Mary Kay to present what the work that they did, I think that'd be important.
I think the bullying one is really important too, because I think, I just know, in our family, that's very important, and I think the more up to date we can be with all of that, the better, in terms of the schools and how it's handled and all of that. So to me, that would be a priority. And then probably the dress code as we get into the warmer weather.
So if we're putting a time frame on, and I'm just going to pop a calendar over here. I would think I want to give the attorney a couple weeks. So I would think maybe if we planned a policy meeting for the last week of March. Actually, I want to give you time to look at it too, based upon her feedback. Hold on. Let me rethink that. She would have it for 2 weeks. No, that's correct. Last week of March. So I would, if I were going to get our policies pretty quickly, which I think I can, she could review them for a couple weeks, and then you would have them, for a week, and then we can meet the week of the 28th for that first set of what I'll call legal policies. Does that work for you?
I'm pretty well booked up the last week, but I have a meeting at 4 o'clock on the 28th. It'll last at least 2 hours.
Do you have any free nights that week, Herb, or times?
The only day I have is Friday, and I don't think anyone wants to meet on Friday. What
That's
time?
up to you all.
On the 28th at 6 o'clock on.
That's up to Ann and.
I have to get my calendar. Hold on.
Yeah, grab it.
Phil, on policy 5144.1 on physical restraint, a policy like that has probably 4 or 5 pages because of the ramifications and all the things that you have to do when you're restraining. We don't do too much of that though, do we?
No,
I mean,
it's not.
maybe
It's not used a lot.
Students, this would apply, but for
Correct.
most students, we're not putting them in a room somewhere or a quiet spot or things like that.
No, and it's really in a student's IEP if there's anything, and it's very, very rare.
Yeah.
Typically, it's for safety purposes. So we're looking at March 28th at 6 p.m. is what Herb is proposing.
Possibly the 31st.
That's, I tutor every Thursday. I work with an Afghan family and I'm there from 4 to 5 in Willie. So I could be later, but, and it's really hard to change because they don't understand.
That's fine.
And everybody gets all confused when you don't do it on the right day,
Well,
So,
did the 28th at 6 p.m. work for people?
yeah, but Herb, did you have a 2-hour Zoom before that? So that might be much.
I have a meeting at 4 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I'm pretty sure it'll go at least 2 hours.
So do you want to do 6:30 to 7:30? I mean, we can limit ourselves and say, hey, an hour of policy work is a lot.
I'll be in the car at 6:30. I mean, I can zoom in, but.
Well, how about the next week? It doesn't have to be that last week. I'm just trying to set us up for.
Oh,
Yeah.
7 is, I can do like 7. but I don't know if that's too late for y'all.
7 on the 28th?
Mm-hmm.
I
And
could do
that'll
that.
give you an hour off, Herb.
Yeah.
You can go have dinner in between.
At 7 o'clock, Brianna?
I think that's what we decided. Is that okay
7
for
p.m.?
everyone?
7?
Is that what you said, Brianna?
Yeah, I'll be screaming into the driveway, but I'll be here.
I mean, we can make it 7:15 if that's easier.
No, we just need to tell my child to hurry up.
Move it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, so then let's talk about, let's see if we can get another one in. So that would be our March 28th. That's the bullying set. I'll give you all those legal ones. And
So
then
is that, which ones is it, Phil? The bullying and
I'll
the,
send you the list, because what I'll do is I'll break this, what's on my
Okay.
screen here, I'll break these up.
okay.
It's really gonna be bully. It's gonna be number 2.
Oh, hold on.
3.
I'm sorry.
It'll be 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7.
Do you see why bullying is so important in our house? No.
Treating people fairly and nicely everywhere is important, Dan. Okay, so could the dress code, could we do that the following week? I think that one would be faster, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
The week of the 4th?
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Does that give the students enough time?
I
No.
can't,
Oh, they're done.
They're ready, okay.
I can't make Tuesday. That's the only,
Anybody have a preference?
I have, okay, I always confuse this. I have a Zoom at 5 o'clock, but that's Central Time. So is that really 6 o'clock?
Behind you, yes.
Okay, so
No,
on
no,
that,
it's earlier.
It's
No,
4, yeah.
it's earlier.
it would be 4 instead? Okay,
Yeah. If it were 5 here, it'd be 4 there.
for them.
okay. So I could do that the later time?
What day?
What day?
Are we looking at the 4th? Did you say the next week or?
That's up to you.
I can make the 4th, Phil.
Brianna, can you do the 4th?
Yes, it's the same driving time thing, but it's fine.
Do you want to do that one earlier? What time are you out of school, Brianna?
I can leave at 3:30.
So
I
do you-
come
would you-
straight home, I get in the car, I drive to Summers for as soon as I can. And then I can leave Summers at 6:30 or as never she hurries up and gets in the car. And then we come home. It's like a little bit under a half hour.
So do you
I
want-
don't mind jumping on to begin with in the car. I just won't be able to.
Yeah, that's
don't know.
hard.
I
You
don't-
want to be able to participate.
Yeah,
How about that 7 o'clock time? Did
yeah.
that work?
Mhm.
Okay, so April 4th, 7 p.m. And then do you want to tackle I'm just looking at what day is that? You already have a board meeting on the 12th. Did you want a second meeting that week?
When is vacation? Is
The
that,
following week, the week of the
following week.
18th. yeah.
okay. I'm actually more open up that week than the week before, but
Could people make the 18th? Brianna, what night do you not have to race to gymnastics and stuff?
Tuesday.
Tuesday nights? So would
Yes,
the
and
night-
I can make accommodations on Thursdays and Fridays. Really, it's just Monday and Wednesdays that are hard.
So would you want to do a Tuesday night? Or a Tuesday, you're on spring break that week, aren't you?
Yes.
I don't want you to,
There's a town.
I don't-
meeting.
I don't mind the 11th if that's
oh,
open.
19th is town meeting, Herb, you're right.
Oh. Well,
What'd you say? You can make accommodations at Thursday night?
mm-hmm.
I can't do, well,
Oh, yes, right, you're tutoring. And
You
I
know
don't,
what, maybe-
Fridays doesn't matter to me either. We're Still running. No one relaxes on Friday night.
Mhm.
The 21st, Phil, is that what you're talking about?
Whatever people are looking for. If you want to do 21st, could you do a 4 PM, Brianna?
I definitely cannot, yeah.
Oh, what time can you do, Ann?
I could, well, I probably get home around 6-ish or 5:30 to 6-ish
On what day?
on Thursday,
21st.
yeah.
Did we
You wanna
give
do
up on the 11th?
Did we give
Just
up on the 11th?
Yeah.
No. Can people do the 11th?
I can do the 11th.
Okay.
I can also do the 11th.
What time?
Can it be 7 again? Then it's consistent.
Fine by me. Work for everybody else?
And what is that one? Is
That
that
would be the minutes and recording. Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll have Brenda send out an email with all of what policies we're gonna do, what dates they're gonna be, what time the meeting's gonna be. And then what I'll do is I'll give you a timeline, like just we did this for curriculum. I'll give you the policies on this date so that you have a week to review it. And then when it would go to the board. Does that make sense?
What was the last date we decided on?
April 11th. 11.
And what time?
7 PM.
And then we have a full board meeting on the 12th, is that right?
12th, I think so. Yes. Okay, so I'll have Brenda get all of that stuff out, so we have all the dates set. And then if there's any other policies that pop up, I'll let you know, but at least we can target what's in front of us. And get those things things that need to be updated on the website.
Okay.
Sound good to all of you?
Sounds
Yep,
good.
thank you.
I think that is the end of our agenda. We were highly successful, so, all right. I will see you, what time is it? Adjourn at 6:33. I will see you all next week. Have a great weekend.
Bye, take care, everybody.
Good night, everyone.